Welcome to the Theory of DFS Podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can find at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me, as always, Erik Beimfohr, week 2, in the bag. And from what I was listening on the Sunday morning show with you and Gretch on Roto Grinders, I have to assume that maybe you didn't even watch the 4 o'clock games.
I shouldn't have. I did because you gotta fire in some afternoon lineups after your conviction plays total like 2 fantasy points in the early games. No, it was kind of a funny slate where like normally if we're sitting here on we're recording on Monday morning / afternoon depending on your time zone, and like I lost, and some of the the specific plays that I ended up on really didn't do much, but it was almost like still kind of like felt right, like got some things right, but you were wrong type of situation. Like my real conviction was on the Broncos basically, and then made a couple of moves on Sunday morning with some of the mainly the Paris Campbell being inactive. I reacted wrongly to that, but made some moves on Sunday morning that like I don't really feel bad about. I made a couple of decent swaps that didn't get me there, but like kind of like one of those weird Sundays where like I feel like got a lot right, made some good decisions, but bricked everything.
Well, I got most of everything right. Most of everything right. I got one major thing wrong. I played 150 in the slant. And then I played 25 single entry 3 max lineups. Mm-hmm. So unlike you who plays like 1 to 3 lineups, so I played, the double spy, the spy, 3 in the power sweep. Like I was playing all of that type of stuff. And I play by lineups. I don't hand build. I just go into lineup HQ and go, okay, I want this type of lineup. I want a Josh Allen lineup. What does that look like? And then I'll go through 50 to 100 of them and go, okay, I like this one, I like that one, I like this one. And then I start saving lineups, and then I get it down to 25. So instead of me having to click through, the things that, quote, I got right were attaching Michael Pittman to Cooper Kupp. Mm-hmm. I didn't have much Cooper Kupp, but where I had Cooper Kupp, I had Michael Pittman with him. Or like in the slant, I had some Pascal with him. So how do I mitigate this Kupp ownership? By pairing him with someone from the other side of the game that wasn't going to... No one in the Colts was really owned. Then another getting right was playing the Kyler stacks with our boy KJ Osborne, with Rondell Moore, Kyler Murray, Rondell Moore, getting cheap, KJ Osborne. I was playing more of Najee Harris and Carson than anything else, because the other thing that I did was in my 25 lineups, I had no Dak and no Herbert stacks. Like I was going to who could outscore this game easier. Well, that have pieces that I could fit together well. Tom Brady, Josh Allen, and Kyler Murray. Right, so like that was the primary way I was building. I was throwing in some Pittsburgh Raiders lineups. I had one Rams stack. Kupp, Higbee, Pittman. Of course, Higbee didn't do anything. Mixing in running backs like Zeke and Eckler as negative correlation to the passing games of the Chargers Cowboys. Like me listing through all of this, playing Noah Fant at tight end, right? Playing cheap Chase Edmonds, and playing obviously Gronk in Brady stacks, right? Godwin, Gronk, Brady, and Ridley, who had 19, so that wasn't that bad. Or Pitts in non-Gronk
Pitts was okay.
Right, you would think like I'm listing stuff like, oh, you should have like winning lineups and stuff like that. That the one thing that I didn't have, 0 of 175. Derrick Henry, 50 points. Right? That's the one thing. Yes, I had some Wilson, Lockett, Julio Jones lineups, right? But at the price point, like I was more with my macro strategy of being either extremely light to in the slant. I still had some Cowboys Chargers stacks because I'm diversifying. So, but I'll have, I had like 5%, so like not much. My goal was to leverage off of that game. So like if I'm I want as many shots on goal when that game fails as possible. So I was prioritizing all of the the wide receivers in the ranges of Cooper and Lamb and Allen and Williams. Mm-hmm. So it's like I'm playing DJ Moore. I'm playing like pretty much everyone 6K and above. Like I'm playing all those wide receivers, which means I'm playing lineups that have constructions that have 5 and 6K running backs. Right? $7,300 Eckler is like the highest. So I'm not getting much of Kamara. I'm not getting much of Dalvin Cook. I'm not getting much of McCaffrey, and I'm not getting much of Henry. And I mean, outside of Henry, those top end. I mean, Cook had a decent game. Cook wasn't bad. What did he had? He had 19.8, but I mean, he didn't pay off for his salary.
Right. Same thing with McCaffrey. McCaffrey scored like 25 or something.
Right,
but
and he
same
got
thing.
injured or whatever. So I mean, none of them put up a score that you needed that a wide receiver couldn't have picked. But Henry was. I mean, I profited. I made pretty much almost all my money back that I lost in week 1. Right. Like I was competing in some of these, like I think in the SPY, one of the SPYs, or the 50K SPY, I was like in 2nd and 3rd place. So I'm like, okay, I got a Kyler Murray, Hopkins, Osborne lineup. I got, I got a Brady, Godwin, Gronk lineup with Cooper Kupp. I got all that, and then just Derrick Henry in the second half. Just like that lineup now comes in 12th, right? Yep. And then I get a power sweep lineup that comes in like 48th, right? And then I sweep in cash, because obviously in cash I played Cooper Kupp, and I played the if the Chargers Cowboys game like went off, I mean, I would have lost some of the GPP money, but I would have made the money. I mean, dude, I had 7-point Dak in my cash lineup on DK, and still won 87% of my head-to-head. So I had a good week, but it's like that. If you don't have the 50-point scoring running back, like you can't win big or anything. Being that he was only 5% owned in most contests. 6% in the SPY, 5% in the Mega Millionaire, 4% in the Slant, 7% in the normal $20 milli. Do you think that? I think that based on my macro strategy, like I did the correct thing. But if your strategy was to fade Najee Harris and Chris Carson, and you didn't play Derrick Henry, like I heard on your morning show, like the contrarian way to build this week was actually the way that if you played the week 1 style this week, right, by paying up twice at running back and playing no wide receiver over 6K, that would be heavily contrarian. So it seems like you were more inclined to do that. Do you think it's, and of course you only have like 3 lineups or something. Yeah. But if your strategy was to leverage off the running backs and flip the build, there's no reason why you shouldn't have had any Derrick Henry.
I agree. And that was basically my strategy. Now I went to Kamara and CMC, of course, but again, remove the names. It was the same premise. That was basically like my main team. I played 3 tournament lineups, and my main team was that I played Teddy Bridgewater, which people will be like, oh my God, you're a psychopath. But it was a cheap Broncos stack. And
I saw some very sharp players with Bridgewater stacks.
Yeah, I played. That was like I think I said it at the top. The Broncos were like my stand basically. So across all my teams, I had some form of Broncos. KJ Hamler was my most important player, and he obviously did nothing. And I didn't play Cortland Sutton, and that was the difficulty I was having, was figuring out. I feel like my lineups didn't come together perfectly. And so there was basically 2 things that I ended up kind of taking a stand on. We all know about what the afternoon was going to be, right? We all know about the Cowboys and Chargers game. And even beyond that, we all like the field, especially on DraftKings, has gotten smarter. I was focused on the $4,000 Mega Millionaire or whatever the hell that they call it. So this is all, the best players on the planet. And they all see this stuff too, right? Late swaps and pivots off of the Cowboys and all this stuff. So I'm thinking through all of these things. And basically, on Sunday, like I had decided the Broncos thing like maybe on Saturday, that they were going to kind of be my stand. And then this Paris Campbell news comes out, and I was actually on this kind of barbell approach at running back to get away from that 6K tier of, Najee, Carson, even like Eckler, Zeke, whatever. I was trying to get down towards the bottom, which originally was like Chase Edmonds and Javonte Williams were kind of my guys, or get up towards the top. Now, in one team, I did go to Jonathan Taylor, but my premise was essentially use those Colts running backs, right? People were not going to go back to these Colts running backs, and they were the perfect kind of what I did stack the Rams once, or whether you're playing Cooper Kupp, this Colts kind of correlation. I thought it gave the Paris Campbell thing gave them a pretty hefty boost. Now, obviously, that went to Michael Pittman. It pretty much all went to Michael Pittman, and they even played Marlon Mack, which did not happen in week 1. So the whole situation didn't go, how I needed it to go. But basically my premise was to use those running back slots to either kind of barbell to get away from that chalk to the elites, or down to, cheaper kind of more punt options, including pass catchers like a Naheem Hines or something like that. And like I said, that didn't work. But it also, I kind of wanted that wide receiver spot for the opportunities to do stuff with the afternoon games, right? If I hit on this Broncos game, I kind of want to have the options to do, like you named all those million afternoon wide receivers, right? And all those secondary correlations. My plan was basically to figure out those secondary correlations, kind of depending upon how my Broncos, and Rams Colts stuff went. I wanted to take a little bit, I know Cooper Kupp wasn't contrarian or anything like that, but his ownership came in at higher stakes, much more reasonable than I kind of thought it was going to at the beginning of the week. I think because we are seeing some of this stuff we've talked about in those contests, people are we're all playing the game theory aspect. You know what I mean?
It didn't
like
go down that much, Eric. I mean, in the main Millie, which we considered to be like the softest contest, he was 20.33. In the Mega Millie, he was 18.75. In the Spy, 18.16. So I mean, like, he got some discount, but not nearly
right. But relative to other,
but relative to him being 25 to 30% owned, right?
Yeah, and relative to, like, Mike Evans gets steamed up to like 13%, right? Like, because everybody sees the Mike Evans thing. And so I'm not trying to say like, oh, you had to play Cooper Kupp, but I was willing to play Cooper Kupp, like you said. I didn't play him with Pittman, but with Pittman or in a game stack or something like that, because I felt a little more comfortable with, okay, people are smart, right? People are playing the game theory angle on all these chalky guys in these contests that I'm talking about. And people are playing the late swap thing, right? Everybody else that we were playing against that was the talk of the week, right? All the best games are in the afternoon. Give yourself opportunities to swap, blah, blah, blah. So I was kind of trying to leverage that a little bit. And I actually, like I said, I don't, it didn't work, but I don't really feel that bad about it. The Henry thing, yeah, if I was playing 150 and I was keeping my same approach, I probably would have had like some Henry Lockett or, Henry Metcalf or something like that might have worked out. I didn't personally land there, but I think, there was a lot of interesting ways to attack this slate. And I don't think that any of the ones that I probably would have chose won. But I think that there were a lot of good angles to take.
But I mean, in your 3 lineups, did you play, or at least originally intend to play, any of the Cowboys Chargers game?
I didn't intend to play, but it's funny that I actually galaxy brained myself in the afternoon into thinking, okay, all I see all over Twitter is everybody swapping. Oh God, my teams suck. I got to swap. I didn't play Cooper Kupp. I got to swap. Blah blah blah. So I did play secondary Cowboys Chargers, and it came in a little higher than I thought it. But it was kind of like I was drawing dead to win everything based on my teams, and so I did swap on the teams that I thought really needed some extra life. And so it was kind of more like me running an experiment type of thing. Like, all I saw all afternoon was I knew everybody was talking about swapping. I knew everybody was talking about getting off of that game. And so it was almost just kind of, like I said, an experiment for this very unique situation. And I now having seen, I forget, Amari came in semi-reasonable. Keenan was pretty wildly popular, and so I played Keenan. That was, I think, the biggest mistake. But it was very. I was really trying to think, be thoughtful about who I'm playing and all this information that I'm gathering about late swap. And so I think I probably should have swapped, but I kind of wanted to see, it's just kind of it was a worthwhile test for me.
Right, because you're playing obviously in much higher stakes contests, much more observant opponents, and I play a little bit lower, right? Still spy, power sweep, those types of contests are still, for most people, are still higher stakes.
Casual people, they're
right. But I'm not playing the 4-4-4-4 milli. I'm not playing a $4,000 lineup.
And that's what I'm talking about, to be clear.
Right.
Where I was talking about in the $4,000 contest. Yeah.
Right. But I didn't find this week. I listened to a lot of content throughout the course of the week. This week reminded us. We said it last week on the podcast of that Cowboys.
Yeah.
The Cowboys game that everyone's like, oh, this is obvious chalk, and then it ends up being the third highest owned stack because everyone like, well, we got to get off the game. I did not feel it was this. I did not feel at all. I also listen to more mainstream podcasts. Not just Roto Grinder stuff, not just Awesemo stuff, not just stuff like kind of more into our bubble. And what I was hearing was not, oh, get off of this game. Like, it seemed like the part that we were hearing last year in this very similar scenario, it was slightly different. Number one, last year, like, it was that game, and then in a second game, then every other game was under 50. Like, there was one pivot, and then like all these other games were like 49s, 48, which is still fine. This week we had 5 games 50 or above. This was the Chargers game was the highest at 55, but that Seahawks Titans game, the Vikings Cardinals game, the Buccaneers Falcons game, I mean, a point or two below. So we had multiple other options, and that week last year was everyone's going to play this because it's so obvious. We got to find something else, and then the obvious game goes under-owned. In this, even with more options, I was hearing more of this is the game of the century. Jam it in. If anything, I heard more people talking about overstacking. Like, how do you play this game different? Like, okay, you still got to play this game, but it's going to be Prescott, Cooper, Schultz, or Jarwin, or you play Zeke in a passing. You still play Dak with Zeke, or you play Eckler with Herbert, and then you get off Keenan Allen by playing Jalen Guyton. I was hearing right, like Cedric Wilson is Noah Brown. Like, everyone was trying to find weird ways to play this game, and I'm looking at 4 other games that have 50 plus totals, going like, dude, the Buccaneers have a 32-point implied total. And they throw the ball in the end zone. Like, Josh Allen has a 26-point total, and they almost never run the ball until yesterday. until Zach Moss has 2 touchdowns, right?
And Singletary has a touchdown.
And right, exactly. But and then you have Kyler Murray, who, come on, I mean, it's Kyler Murray. Like, what? I take a look at this and go, we have so many more options that even if that game goes off, you may still not even need. I mean, like to me, it was lose to play. Of like, if I because people were trying to find ways, how do I stack that game and still be different enough? And you could do that. And I talked on the Monday pregame show with James McCool, and I said it felt simple to me in my 25 build. Now, when I played the 150 slant, I had 5% of each of Herbert and Dak. I can make lineups like that, but it's only going to encompass 15 of my lineups. And I'll find the ones that have the Michael Pittman with Cooper Kupp, like the 1% this, KJ Osborne, like those types of guys. AJ Green, right? I played way too much of him. He still got there. He's got a touchdown.
Yeah, he scored, yeah.
Right. Adam Troutman in a bunch of my lineups with a 0, just a punt at tight end. So I thought it was just easy in the 25 build to just say, like, the Chargers Cowboys game is overowned, just X them out. Right? Just build my lineups as if that game doesn't exist, other than the running backs, right? Other than Eckler and Elliott, and then I saw I built 50 lineups with the Chargers Cowboys game stack, so like a 3+1. The projection difference between that and like Josh Allen stacks and Kyler Murray stacks and Tom Brady stacks were like 3 points.
Yep.
So once I saw that, I'm like, I have no issue in my 25 build to just X out Herbert, X out Prescott, see what comes up. Maybe I'll end up with some Allen, Lamb secondaries, maybe. But just once I X out the quarterbacks, obviously I can't get them in stacks. I can only get them in secondaries. And even then, once I X them out and ran 50 lineups, I got zero. I got like an Eckler Lamb one, and I got like a Zeke Cook one. Like basically once I'm filling up my lineups, obviously Josh Allen with like Steph Diggs. So that takes me off of all of the receiver. I mean, it locks up salary. And then I'm playing, DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm playing Chris Godwin. I'm playing other guys. So I'm not getting any lineups that have this Cowboys-Chargers game. And when I saw that, it was like a 3-point difference in projection and like 2/3 of the ownership. I'm like, why? I'm not even going to overthink this. I'm just going to okay, I'm in my 25 build. In my 150 build, sure, I'll some. But to me, that was easier than doing the opposite of like Najee Harris and Chris Carson with two chalk running backs. But they're chalk at 6,000. I'm not a big fan of running back variants, right? Because I want to play different running backs. But there was no need to do both.
Correct.
Like to me, there was no need to X out the Chargers game and then X out Harris and Carson, because when I did that and I ran 50 lineups, these lineups were like 8 points behind. I mean, like the combinations of running backs. Yeah, I would get more. I got more Henderson. I got more Damian Harris in those types of lineups, which was fine, and I did play those types of lineups. But once you X out both of them, you're like giving up like 2 points per player in all of these lineups. And I saw the ownership difference because Najee Harris in the slant, for instance, came in at 25%, and Carson came in at 24%. I thought that was around their efficient ownership.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't Najee Harris. My gauge was, is Najee Harris going to be 32% owned? Is Carson, I wasn't worried about Carson. People don't like playing him. In the Millie, he was 15% owned. And he got lucky to get there. Both those guys got lucky to get there.
Yes, they did.
Right? Carson got 13 carries but 2 touchdowns, and Najee Harris got there in basically a flat pass, and that's about. But he was on the field for every snap except for one. When Benny Snell came in, you almost have a heart attack, going, "Uh-oh," right?
Oh no, not 100, not 99%.
No, I thought I was concerned maybe it was 50%. Maybe they're going to split roles. But I just thought that the running back ownership this week was, I think, for mostly efficient. So to me, the running back position wasn't the main factor of any of my lineups. It was like, I think the running backs are all about efficiently owned. So whatever shows up in my lineup shows up. And if it happens to be Harris Carson, well, it just means that my stack is going to be different. Like if my ownership sum is like under 100, and I'm already playing 25% owned guys, it's like that's a lineup that has Michael Pittman in it. That's a lineup that has KJ Osborne or Rondell Moore. I mean, so now I just don't have to even think about this stuff anymore. It's like good. But obviously that takes me out of Derrick Henry. And I'm exclusively playing 4 wide receiver lineups. I'm exclusively playing a wide receiver flex. So like my process, I think from a simplicity standpoint on top of a strategic standpoint was one of the 2 macro directions to go, right? You did one macro direction. I did one macro direction. I think they both were sound, but based on that, I think there was more way for you to get the winning lineup than for me, even though you lost. Like I won and I made money. Yet with my macro strategy, it's based on the results. I had no shot at first place. Yet with your macro strategy, you actually had a shot. If you, let's say you, instead of doing that, you played Henry, Rondell Moore, KJ Osborne, Kyler Murray, like you ended up with the flipped up build, 2 cheap wide receivers. Like your macro strategy could have ended up on a nut lineup.
Yeah.
But if you missed Henry, your macro strategy ends up coming in almost last place.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't hit on the cheap guy and the expensive running back, if you don't get that exact 1v1, Henry plus one of the cheap guys that went off for 20, like you're pretty much dead, right? You play Kamara and Terrence Marshall instead, and your lineup is like your lineup is literally like down almost by the end. But my lineups are more likely to be in my macro strategy based on the results. Obviously, if Henry only puts up 20 points, then my strategy works out way more than your strategy did. Just so happened that we have a 50-point running back that I was unlikely to ever get to, while you could have possibly gotten to more of.
Right, and like you said, it's obviously clearly dependent upon the fact that Derrick Henry just scored 50 points.
Right,
like
but I just want to highlight, Eric. I'm just bringing it up because I do this in like MMA or an NFL showdown. Like an NFL showdown, if a lineup that's tied 700 ways wins first place, I'm fine. I'm fine losing that slate because it's like there's no way I get to that lineup. Like there's no chance of me getting there. And MMA to chalk hit this past weekend, the 16-way tie for first. I look at that lineup and go. There's nothing in my process that would have gotten me there. So like, there's no need to fret. It's those times where I could have gotten to that lineup if I just had, a 2v2. Like I had everyone in my pool, I just didn't have that exact lineup. Like I'm not concerned. Like yeah, Henry won people tons of money in the GPPs, and I look at this going, no matter if I won or lost, like I'm never gonna. If I played this slate out 100 times, I just never get there. Just like I'll go on to the next slate and play my macro strategies and so be it. So it's not just well, a lot of people, Eric, will replay the slate, go, how could I have gotten there? And it's like, no, I go like I knew what my decision. I'm sound my decisions. I don't regret what I did macro wise, and I just couldn't. I wouldn't have. I should have. Now should I've added Henry and like no, my it didn't fit everything. What I was attempting to do.
Exactly. It changes everything. So I'm gonna read my main lineup to you, which people are gonna laugh. Like how is this the lineup? Well, first of all, I did figure out some swaps because I had 4 spots left for the afternoon. So anyway, I was playing Teddy Bridgewater on my main team.
Okay, so who was the 4 in the 1 p.m. games in the lineup?
Bridgewater, McCaffrey, Kamara, KJ Hamler, and James O'Shaughnessy. So I punted tight end with the Jaguars tight end as my bringback, James O'Shaughnessy, for 2,700. He caught a 24-yard pass on the second play of the game and got hurt and never came back in the game. Like I think I tweeted, like I'm like trying to troll some people, and a buddy of mine had been talking up O'Shaughnessy like from more like season-long type stuff. All week, whatever. And like, he just happened to fit what I was doing. I don't actually like James O'Shaughnessy, but I wanted, like we went through kind of my macro approach to the slate. McCaffrey and Kamara, I actually kind of liked the correlation between those two guys, given their receiving roles. And I'm almost surprised, the Saints got dusted so bad that it didn't work for Kamara, but it almost kind of like game script wise worked. So anyway, a Teddy Bridgewater to KJ Hamler stack with a freaking James O'Shaughnessy bring back and the double stud running backs. And so then I have everything available to me in the afternoon, which fit exactly what you were saying. I had a punt, basically a spot for a punt wide receiver, which ended up, we'll get to in a second, a punt wide receiver. And I had my defense, to keep my flexibility with a defense to move some things around if I needed more money or whatever. And then 2 wide receivers that could be mid to upper tier wide receivers, or it could be a running back if I wanted it to be, but it wasn't going to be a running back. So what I landed on for those final spots was Tyler Lockett and Julio Jones as my kind of secondary there. And then Josh Palmer as my punt wide receiver, solely because I needed the savings, and he was kind of the one like tiny low owned piece in that game. I wasn't going to play Cedric Wilson given where I was at in the standings with what did Hamler got 1.5 and O'Shaughnessy got 3 and Kamara got 7. So I don't think I can be playing 30% on Cedric Wilson on this team. And then I had the Cardinals defense just kind of fit in there, and they were a little higher than I had hoped, but. Anyway, that was kind of, so that was like my approach. Like as I read off that team, you can see I had this cheap stack, this cheap, super, super low owned stack with the expensive running backs. And then kind of depending on how that went was how my other spots were going to be filled out. I landed on, Lockett and Julio went well, almost went really well. And Palmer was useless. But that was my plan of attack. Maybe if Teddy, and Teddy was really good. It's just it all went to Cortland Sutton. Maybe if I play Cortland Sutton and something changes, we'd be having a different conversation today around maybe I land on something. Or to your point, if I had went the Henry route, right? Because I was going with the elite running backs. If I went Henry then Dalvin or something instead of those two guys.
Even if you went McCaffrey and Dalvin, I mean, even then, Kamara's score killed you.
Brutal. Yeah, I mean, what do you do? What do you do when you pay $9,000 for a guy that scores 7 points?
Right, but I mean, you went in with the late swap strategy, and I went in with I knew that my Bills lineups, like the two main games from the 1 p.m. window that I was playing were the Bills and the Steelers Raiders game, and I had Ben, I also had Carr, I had both sides. Deontay Johnson, and I mean, I had a combination of all of them, knowing that in those lineups, if they get there, if Josh Allen plus Sanders plus Waddle plus Diggs gets there, well, now my flex spot is CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper or Keenan Allen.
Yep.
Right. I know in my Carr, Waller, Renfro, Deontay Johnson lineups. Right, I know I got Cooper, Williams. I mean, I could put any secondary correlation in there because I also got Carson in those lineups that I could always pivot to another guy. Right, I got so much flexibility there, but I got to see if they get there. Now, obviously, the Allen stacks didn't get there. Right, I mean, they did fine, but not to win a GPP. Right. Same for Carr, same for Bet. Like none of them got there. So like my lineups that didn't have, I stood pat. Like I was playing less of that game than anything else. So it's like okay, just now that I hope the truck game fails more, so these could cash at least. Because I'm not going to win with a 6.8 out of Beasley and 12 out of Diggs and 16 out of Allen. I mean, like I know that's not going to win. But I didn't need the late. I didn't need the late swap in most of my lineups because, I mean, everything kind of went. I was playing most of the other games from the 4 p.m. window anyway. So why am I like nothing got there in the 1 p.m. slate? I mean, other than the Broncos.
Broncos as a team. Team got their Fant caught a touchdown, right? And Sutton was really good. And then Teddy was pretty good, but there was no bringbacks. Again, like the Jaguars were pretty.
No, Marvin Jones. You could have Marvin Jones.
Marvin Jones. Yeah, right. Marvin Jones. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, but that's the only thing that really got there.
And Cup.
Yeah. Right, and Cup Pittman. But I'm saying, but I don't think like a Stafford, like maybe that's doable. I'm talking about not a team. Like, if you tell me the Bills score 35 points, I'm playing Allen stacks all day. So it just so happens that that's 3 rushing touchdowns. Yeah. And then and Dawson Knox has one of them passing touchdowns. So like I don't regret that or anything. But I mean, to me, it saved less work. It was less work for me. I didn't need to late swap on anything because I was planning on the scenario that it was anyway. Like if the Steelers game and the Bills game, those stacks got there, then I'd be spending $3.30 to $4, swapping stuff around and trying to get chalk into those lineups. But I started from that approach. I think a lot of people went with the opposite approach. Like I started from it's easy for me to just fade this game and then add it back if needed.
Correct.
Yet most people did the late swap thing of like, well, I'm going to play a ton of this game with small pieces around it. And if my pieces get there, leave alone. If my pieces don't get there, swap. But to me, that leads to doing even more. I'd rather have a Cooper Kupp, Pittman, Sutton lineup that originally was a Brady stack and then go, okay, I'm turning this into a Herbert stack. Right? Like to me, I'd rather, I think from a logistical standpoint, but that also comes from I'm able to do that with the macro strategy since I was already like way under and fading that. Even in that 25 set, I faded that game completely. But I had like half my lineups were Kyler and Tom Brady and Russell Wilson. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I could go through and make them Cowboys Chargers stacks. I think so much of the focus was on the other regard of like, right? It seemed like mostly you were trying to outsmart the people that like, I got to get Cowboys Chargers out of my lineup.
Yeah.
And me, it's like I just set myself
meme,
up to
right?
be in that position to just add them if needed.
And I even took it a step further where I wanted to gather even more information because I could not possibly agree more with what you said. From everything that I was listening to, again, these types of people that I was playing against were doing I want to gather a little bit of information, right? I'm going to play somebody that's low, or they might have even played somebody that was, maybe they played Cooper Kupp early, but they're just gathering that tiny little, right? They played one or two guys early, or they definitely weren't stacking one of the early games, right? They were just, how do I get a little bit of information and then let me decide my swaps, right? If I played Jonathan Taylor and he sucked like he did, okay, now I can't play the Cowboys. But if I played Cooper Kupp and Michael Pittman, now I can play the Cowboys. And that was all that was everything that I heard all week. So I even then kind of took it a step further, like you talked about with your Steelers, Steelers lineups, Bills lineups. I was like, well, I'm going to stack an early game or two. And that's really the information that I'm gathering because I still have all these spots available for these secondary correlations. You can basically still stack two games at once, right? If I wanted to when I played Teddy Bridgewater, if I still wanted to stack the Cowboys game, I can do that without their quarterback, right? I could play Cedric Wilson, CeeDee Lamb, and Keenan Allen. No problem. Like that, I could have done that if I wanted to. Like I literally could have done that. And so, but I wanted to gather even more information than my opponents were gathering, basically. Now, again, I gathered information that was, oh shit, you're screwed here. You're gonna lose. But now I have that information. Some of my opponents didn't even have any of that. Like you think you have some information, but when everybody is doing the same thing, figuring out how to attack that Cowboys game in the afternoon, that's why, like I said, on one team, I went with them. I think that was probably a mistake and probably a low probability bet that they were going to come in lower than I expected. But I was willing to take that shot because I think it was just a really interesting, specific use case where now we're even getting the sharper people who are all like, okay, I am trying to gather this information or I am trying to set up for a late swap. And so I was like, well, I'm going to stack this Broncos game. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm going to stack this Broncos game. If it goes off at these cheap prices, now like I have so much more information than my opponents do, because all my opponents were planning for the afternoon. You know what I mean? It wasn't like one thing, like late swap. I agree. I'm trying to gather information and then make the best decisions based on the new information that I have. This was like, we talk about the game theory and like the levels to these tournaments. I was like trying to level the late swap thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but do you really think that
bad about it.
Do you really think even in the higher stakes, do you think you overestimate that?
A little,
because I look through some of the mega millionaire stuff, and I mean I'm not going to call people out or anything, but I mean there are some lineups towards the bottom, and I'm like, why does this lineup still have a Cowboys Chargers stack? And like I mean I go through and I go, why was this not late? This is, I mean, you take a look and you see 4 points out of a running back slot and 2 points out of a wide receiver slot, and you go, why is this a Herbert, Allen, Williams, Cooper lineup? Still, yeah. By the time it gets into results DB, and I think in comparison to the lower stakes, in comparison to the large field GPPs, you're absolutely right. That the difference, but that like so few 1% of people late swap, and in the higher stakes, that's dramatically more, but. Not everyone. Yeah. I mean, you could say the same thing for cash games with me. People DM me or message me or whatever once in a while and say, you talk about late swapping and head-to-heads if you're behind. I happen to be matched up with you in a $5 head-to-head, and we both had the same guy here, and you didn't swap. It's like, yeah, because I'm playing 300 head-to-heads, and I'm not getting to my $5 ones. I've accepted that as a part of the time efficiency, that I'm going to be negative EV in a lot of those things in the $5 range. In my 215s, my 109s, my $50 ones, yes, I go through those, right? I'll go through those. So to me, I view kind of, we have a lot of rich people that are good, that the 44 entry is just 4,000 of $350,000 that they're putting into play, and they may not get around to it. We see that on secondary sites. There are a lot of times that Someone points out that some sharp player has a dummy lineup and 150 of their Yahoo lineups. It's like they didn't get to it, or they had an error, or so they're playing on 4 different platforms and they're playing $700,000 of volume. Like, they're not gonna they intellectually they'll be like, well, we should be swapping here and swapping there, but they may not get to everything. So like, do you take it a little, like you tried to galaxy brain that, and I was like, I even think in the higher stakes, like there wasn't even a worth of, everyone's swapping off of Keenan Allen, he's going to show up at 8% ownership. Like I didn't think that was.
I didn't think that. No, I definitely didn't think that. But I think what was unique about this slate is like how you touched on all the other afternoon games. Like, I'm looking through the ownership in that contest right now, and it's not like they got crazy bumps, but like all the Buccaneers wide receivers are, in the top X wide receiver ownerships. Stephon Diggs is actually quite a bit higher than I thought he was going to be too. DK Metcalf.
Chase Edmonds got a huge bump because people were swapping off of Carson.
I know that one, and that one killed me because I had Chase Edmonds and I was backed into it basically on one team. But point being, it wasn't even just the swap thing. I think if it were a slate like you talked about, the Cowboys slate, from last year, again, it wasn't the perfect dynamic for this. But if we were heading into a slate where like that was the only game, like say there were 3 games in the afternoon and one of them was, Giants Redskins and the Giants football team, and the other one was, Patriots Dolphins, and then it was the Cowboys team, I think we'd be having a very different conversation. But if it, like this week, it was like, well, do you want to swap off CeeDee Lamb? There's DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Calvin Ridley and AJ Brown and Julio. There were all of these options, and so I'm just trying to kind of, I would rather err on the side of honestly like being a little bit too contrarian or too, and I don't even think I was too contrarian, but
you were too contrarian by playing the chalk. I mean, that's what you're saying.
No, not in that. No. Sorry, not in that specific example of staying on them. But I'm trying to, in general, the idea of like mega galaxy braining, like late swap, or like my idea of gathering even more information so that I can figure out late swap later, as opposed to just using late swap. I think like I'm totally fine like erring on that side of things, as opposed to just saying, I'm just going to use late swap, or I'm just going to fade the chalk or whatever. I think that there's that it's real, that slate in particular was like pretty crazy to me in terms of just the different variables that we had, and with that one game, but also with all the pivots that existed on the afternoon. And so I think, like I said that earlier, I think it was ultimately a mistake in the one team that I went to the Cowboys and Chargers guys. But it's like I'm kind of happy that I did it in a weird way. I'm kind of happy with the fact that with the teams that I played, and even though they worked out terribly, like just kind of seeing the path that it gave me. You talked about it earlier, the path that it gave me to first place, and the path that it gave me to the appropriate swaps. Even if I didn't execute them perfectly, like I'm kind of happy. Like I feel better on a Monday morning after bricking tournament teams. I feel better than I probably normally would, just because of moving forward, how I feel like in some of these contests, how things will play out. And this one specifically was pretty different. It was like 800 and something people. So like next week, the high stakes contest is like 200 people or 250 people, which is a little bit more normal. And that's when we'll really get some polarizing ownership, is when you get down to that small of a field size, which is really actually where I prefer to focus on that field size. So anyway, long-winded way of saying, I think I'm just trying to kind of be really thoughtful about this, what my opponents are doing, even if I'm like maybe making mistakes in my exact implementation of it. I'm focusing pretty heavily on that, and I actually feel fairly good. Like I said, as weird as it sounds after losing a bunch of money.
Right. I mean, you focus. I mean, we talk about even stakes, but you prefer. You're very similar to Michael Leone. You like those 200-person fields.
Yeah.
Right. I always look at that Game Changer and I go, I'd rather just have 3 power sweep lineups. Like I'd rather have, like I thrive. Obviously you come from small fields. I come from large fields. I
Yeah.
prefer the 1,000, right? The 1,000 to 5, even 5,000, like that range. 800, you said, like something where it's like, okay, I could still play a lineup that would even make sense for the slant in this type of contest, but know that the ownership is going to be slightly more condensed, but not heavily condensed like it is in a 200 man or whatever.
Mhm.
So that's why I build my lineups that way. It's more. I think that my strengths are in those, and I'd rather give myself more bullets in those.
Yeah.
Like last year, I wouldn't play 3 entries in the power sweep. I just play 1, right? Because I was playing a lot more large field stuff. So I was playing slant and all the play action and anything that was like 100,000, 80,000 people or above. So I was devoting so much of my volume to that it's like how much. So I'll play 8 single entry 3 max teams, right? Something, and then hand build
Yep.
those 6 of them or something. 1 in the spy, 2. There are 2 spies, right? There's 2 power sweeps, right? Do 1 to beat. Now I'm just like 3 in both power sweeps. 3, spy, anything. The red zone, the $50 red zone. Okay, there's
Mhm.
the $75 whatever the hell it's called. There's the $33 5 max. Okay, play 5 lineups into that because the largest field size is like 5,000 or something. And then I know which lineup, I know which ones are smaller field sizes, and then I could just build. I could kind of build normally. I'm not thinking about because in those contests I'm probably not overstacking. They're still big enough that I'd still rather have one-off pieces, but they're small enough that I'm going to play game stacks. So it's not like the large field where I played in the slant some lineups that had no run backs. Right? Because you have to get perfect. So I'm like, I'm gonna build some Kyler Murray lineups that don't have any Vikings. I'm gonna build some Tom Brady lineups that have no Ridley or Pitts. And just that the Brady just puts up it's 38-7 and you don't want anyone on the Falcons. Right? I'm building some of those lineups. But in the small field, yeah, no, I have Ridley there. I mean, like I don't have to be perfect, but to beat 68,000 people, I can't be sitting there with a Ridley 10-point game. Like I could still win the spy possibly with that. If Brady, Godwin, Gronkowski goes for 40, 35 and 32 and they're Gronkowski's 6% owned in the spy even though he's twice as owned in the millie, right? Cuz it seemed like it was seemed like this week what was the talk of this week? And we mentioned it last week. Over the overreaction. What are people going to overreact to? It's a 1-game sample size, right? So we see Najee Harris. We see, the passing rate of the Cowboys. You have a tweet. You had a tweet earlier this morning, right? And you make outside of the actual examples, the main point, the last thing that you said. Let me bring it up.
I don't even remember what I said. I tweet so much nonsense.
Right. Well,
I mix in some
most
serious
of it is trolling
ones.
other people, right?
Some serious ones in between the bullshit. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So here he said, we frequently get very attached to both small samples and the most recent games in NFL because it's a game of small samples with such a short season. On the flip side, sometimes we ignore outliers in small samples if they don't confirm our priors. Then you give some examples, but the point at the end is we want to have all the answers and feel confident in everything. So once we get some data, we easily become overconfident in what will happen. Or we pick and choose when to ignore new data and stick to priors. And every week we find out we know much less than we thought. So the point that you're making is not you should not trust any of week 1 data,
right,
or trust none of week 1 data, but all the points throughout the week. Like, remember last week I brought up, what is the field going to do with KJ Osborne? And you're like, so what the fuck? Is anyone going to go to, really? And I'm like, yeah, he had like 8 targets and 7 catches and something. Like, is he the wide receiver 3? Is this target share for Jefferson and Thielen like going down? Yeah, he's still going to be the 4th option because Cook's there. But like, maybe that's a thing, right? Right? Rondell Moore, yeah, he got there. He got the he got there, but he was barely on the field. And then he gets a little bit more on the field, but now he gets targeted even more. Like
yes.
Which the thing is, which of those people were picking and choosing? It's like, oh, we go by week 1, Najee Harris smash, right? But you go, how about KJ Osborne? Like, who the fuck is KJ Osborne? Right? I mean,
Exactly.
Rondell Moore, right? You do that. Or, like, look, Michael Pittman in week 1 was actually like 12% owned. He was 4,100 in week 1. People played him. I did. And Carson Wentz threw to running backs, like, more of the time. And then Pascal gets 2 touchdowns. And then, never mind, I was playing him even with the Harris Campbell was in. And I'm just going, people are playing Cooper Kupp. People are playing Darrell Henderson. And no one's playing the Colts. And Michael Pittman, like, barely went up in price at all. We were fine playing Pittman the week before. And the Rams passed the ball. This game is actually going to be faster paced than it was last week. Like, why aren't I playing Michael Pittman? And I had Michael Pittman at like 5% owned. And he ended up 1.74% owned.
Yeah.
And I go, what? Why? You didn't, because you didn't hear that. All you heard was, oh, Carson Wentz throwing to running backs more. Jonathan Taylor, this, and now he's a much, like, dude, we have a 1 week sample size. Why can't I go to their wide receiver 1? Which, I mean, their wide receiver crew is not all that great, right? Right? I mean, like, how come you're fine going with short 1 week sample sizes for certain people, but not other people? I think that's the main point.
Yes.
And the point that I was making last week was, I'm going to go the opposite direction of everyone else. Just whatever if 50% of people are thinking this, and 50% of people are like, week 1, we got to use for these 5 examples. Week 1 for these 5 examples, we don't use. Like, I'm just going to play the opposite. I'm just going to, whatever the opposite thing is, like that, I don't know. Hey, it could have been well, why isn't everyone playing Michael Pittman? And he ends up being 14% owned, and I would have been under. Right. I mean, like, it's not about the thing. It's about the, like you can't, it's very similar to, in the RG Discord, where someone will say, so-and-so, especially the Cardi in the Blitz Discord, you're, after a slate, the projection for so-and-so is bad. And I go, what do you consider? What did you have a player that you thought that Cardi had a good projection on? He goes, yeah, he had a good projection on this, and this. It's like, well, it's the same fucking model, right? So, like, if you think the projection is bad on there, then you have to question his entire methodology of how you get the projections to begin with. So you can't have a right. It's either all wrong or all right. And you get a range of outcomes. And then a lot of times they're complaining about, oh, they had a projection of 16 and they only scored 9. It's like, what the floor is 7.74. So basically, between the 25th and the 70th, 50% of the time, it'll be between these two numbers. It came in between those two numbers. Like that's what a projection, that's what it is, right? But you can't, but you can't pick and choose and say, great projection on this guy, horrible projection on that guy, unless it had to do with the target share, unless it had to do, I mean, there are inputs there. But you can't just dismiss, like, all the players that I played that did well, good projection. All the players that I didn't, right? Obviously, like Derrick Henry's projection was horrible, right? I mean, like, obviously everyone projected him horribly because he scored 50 points, and that was well outside the one standard deviation range of outcomes.
He also caught a bunch of passes. So even like the inputs were probably not very accurate because, I mean, nobody saw.
So Derrick Henry, is that what's going to happen next week?
God, I hope not.
Is Derrick Henry, is the conversation going to be, is he going to get 4 targets on average out of the backfield?
It might be, but you couldn't have possibly nailed it any better. And that's what I've been trying to say for like 2 weeks. And it's brutal on Twitter or even on shows because you have to use examples. Like, I can't just say you don't know anything because people are like, well, that's not true. And I'm like, well, it kind of is, but it really is. But then I use all these examples, right? And I say, like, I did another one with like Joe Mixon. They were like, after week 1, everybody's victory lapping Joe Mixon. And then after week 2, everybody's like, oh, fuck, Joe Mixon sucked. He got 1 target and he scored 7 fantasy points or whatever. And you're like, well, yeah, that's because, week to week, things change. We don't really know that much. I know you were right about Mixon's role and you're still wrong about his There's so much that we entirely pick and choose. But everybody, when they see the specific examples, they're like, well, no, you're wrong about this guy. I'm like, that's actually kind of the point, is that I'm not trying to be right or wrong about anyone. I'm just trying to assess where, like you said, Why is it that we were on Cedric Wilson and not on KJ Osborne? You know what I mean? Like there really is no actual reason.
Why weren't we on Pittman?
Priors.
Paris Campbell gets inactive. What? Everyone went to Raheem Mostert when Sermon was inactive. We take Paris Campbell out of this. We're gonna ignore that. Let everyone overreacted. Gallman was inactive again, right? And then no one played them, but like Cordell Patterson is coming out, and he's crushing. And it's like, and then you ask someone, like if you ask someone this week, Falcons versus the Giants, and you go, do you play Cordell Patterson? I guarantee you 95% of people would say, no, he was just lucky last week. Yet if you say, do you play KJ Osborne? And they go, well, he's obviously wide receiver 3 with a 20% target. Like on 2-week sample size, one or the other, it's like you have this previous bias of like, what is it or what is it not? Oh, no, Rondell Moore, it's unsustainable, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it is. But how come you could throw out Cordell Patterson, but you can't throw out Rondell Moore? How come you could, Henry, there'll be plenty of people this week will be like, that these are outliers, him getting these targets. He's not getting these targets anymore. Or it could be, he's getting targets now. He should be 10-5, right? Your point is, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about assessing the probability versus the marketplace.
Yeah.
And doing whatever would be essentially you're arbitraging public opinion.
Yeah.
Is the public opinion the ownership relative to what the probability is? I mean, this is all of DFS. So when you get into arguments on Twitter of are you right, are you wrong, that's what you mean of it's the same thing in sports betting, right? Which side of a game are you on? I'm like, whichever side of the game has the most value based on the spread and the number. I mean, like, I don't care who wins this game. I just care about getting a good number, right? You tell me that I'm going to get, you're going to shave off 2 points for the favorite and charge me the same amount. I'm taking the favorite. There you go. I mean, But do you really think their team is going to win? I don't even know who the team is, right? I mean, like, I could not even watch the sport and do this, right? You could win at sports betting without watching anything, just by, as long as you beat closing lines on a very consistent basis, you're probably going to make money to some extent. That's kind of what we're doing with these quote takes. We're finding like the closing line value of players.
Yeah, and what I found maybe the most fascinating and why I got so locked into situations that didn't work out for me. But your example on the Colts was like maybe the shining example, but it turned into being what my Broncos take was basically. Good matchup, high total, fast paced, whatever game, and the Broncos lost Jerry Jeudy, and everybody's cheap. The entire team was cheap against a team that just got destroyed by the Texans.
Right.
And no one's playing anybody on this offense. You know what I mean? And they're good football players. This isn't like playing, a shitty offense. Like, say whatever you want about Teddy, that's fine. But Javonte Williams, good player. KJ Hamler, Colton Sutton, Noah Fant, even like Albert O.
Even Tim Patrick is serviceable.
Tim Patrick, you could have played like 6 different guys from the Broncos, in my opinion, and I would have been like, that's a pretty good play. Then you get the Colts, where, like you said, last week, people are like, oh, this is a sneaky stack, right? Like, I'll use Pittman and use the Russ to Metcalf or Lockett or whatever. Then we remove Paris Campbell from the equation, and no one's playing any of these guys.
And so many people are playing, and so many people are playing guys from the opposite side of the game.
Cup and Higbee, right? You're playing Cup and Higbee, but now we took an offense you were interested in last week, at least reasonably interested in last week, in a dome, and you removed one of their higher target share players. And then, like you said, last week people were interested in Pittman, and last week we saw these 2 running backs getting like absurd targets, absurd workloads, whatever. And like nobody was interested in any of this. We chose that situation was like, nope. No, Najee Harris played every snap, so we got to jam him in at 30%. But, Jonathan Taylor's getting 8 targets, and Michael Pittman's has like a 30% target share. Nope, not interested in those guys.
But even Darrell Henderson, even if you take a look, Darrell Henderson, I'm looking at, let's see, let me bring this up here on results.
He's another good example.
Darrell Henderson in the SPY was 7.96%. Mega Millionaire 12, Slant 9, regular Millie 6. Now I had in the slant I had 18% of him, so I was like almost double the field. Najee Harris, like I'm going to say this again. right? You just said it. Najee Harris played 100% of the snaps for the Steelers. Darrell Henderson played almost 100% of the snaps for the Rams. The Rams are a better team than the Steelers, right?
Yes.
Okay? The Rams are actually probably a much better team than the Steelers. Yet, Darrell Henderson maybe doesn't, he still gets targeted out of the backfield, but he's not like a prolific pass-catching running back. But he's essentially playing the 2016 Todd Gurley role on the Rams, minus maybe 3 targets.
Yep.
He's 5,700, but Najee Harris played 100% of, I mean, like if that, Eric, do you think this is kind of a weird thought experiment? Do you think if Darrell Henderson played all of the snaps last week, he would have been the chalk over Chris Carson? Like, that Darrell Henderson played 96% of the snaps made the difference of, like, he didn't become a talking point enough. That it's like, well, 96%, Sony Michel is still kind of there, right? But Najee Harris was like 100% all in, right? But the only difference was that Darrell Henderson, like, missed what? 4 snaps or something?
And it was in the fourth quarter, wasn't it? He played every first half snap. I know that for sure. Sony didn't come in that game last week
and Jake
until, like,
Funk came
super
in. I mean,
late.
it's like,
yeah,
he's going to lose work to Jake Funk. Really?
Right. So Henderson got hurt. I don't know if people didn't notice. He got hurt. He actually was well on his way to a pretty monster game, and he got hurt. And Sony took over after that. But I remember the very first snap. I think it was 3rd and long, and Jake Funk was in, and so that's what it was just a very funny situation.
But do you think that if Darrell Henderson last week played 100% of the snaps, that his ownership would have went from 7 to 9% to 20%? Just on like a 4% difference.
The only thing I was going to ask is, what do you think? So he had a teammate who also played 100% of the snaps and was a talking point at tight end, Tyler Higbee.
Tyler Higbee, right?
Played 100% of the snaps last week, and then Cooper Kupp was also underpriced. So I think it's possible that was some of it. We obviously had Najee and we had Carson, whatever, at running back, and so that wound up played into it. But I tend to agree. I think it doesn't really make it. I think it has a little bit of a little sprinkle of each one of those places. Like Tyler Higbee's on his own team and also played 100% of the snaps, so he's kind of drawing some of that away from him. Cooper Kupp, was an absolute smash in week 1 and drew a little bit away from him. And then you have Najee and you have Carson. So I think it was a little. And again, maybe this is spilling over from some of my off-season, season long and best ball type stuff, but everybody seemed to be kind of out on Darrell Henderson because they didn't think he could, again, confirming your priors, right? We picked and choose. I think the market was picking and choosing with Darrell Henderson when to confirm priors and when to buy into. Everybody assumed Najee Harris was going to play 100% of the snaps. That was the reason why people were buying Najee Harris heading into week 1. He was the new Le'Veon Bell, right? People did not think that about Henderson, and because they traded for Sony, everybody was like, no, my priors are that Sony's going to eventually mix in here. I'm not buying this 100% snap share for Henderson, even if he had played 100, literally 100%. I think it was more, now that I'm thinking it through, it was more of the confirming priors thing and picking and choosing when to buy into, as opposed to the exact snap share. But he was well on his way to doing it again. If he doesn't get hurt, he was going to do it again. So yeah, another perfect example. There was a ton of those examples this week.
Yeah. Here's another one. Chase Edmonds and Javonte Williams. Chase Edmonds came in even in the millie at 13% owned. Yeah, now the whole narrative for Chase Edmonds is that he'll catch passes out of the backfield, but he doesn't get red zone touches, right? He's not going to be there in the goal line or whatever. People had no problem dismissing that, right? They'd go, we don't care. Edmonds can still get there from the 25-yard line, right? And I think that's rightfully so. He could catch 7 passes out of the backfield, rush the ball 8 times, and still score. He's James White. You think of those types of guys, these guys.
Souped up James White. Yeah, right. A higher upside James White.
That starts, right. That plays first and second down type of thing. Yep. Javonte Williams, the problem was that, Melvin Gordon's there or whatever, and the same exact thing, and he comes in at 5% owned. We had with Eckler also. The Eckler, no targets last week, right? And he got goal line work, right? This week he comes in, he has 9 targets? He got, or 9 catches.
Yeah.
The prevailing notion on Eckler was, the targets will come back. Just like, I mean, you could go through all these, and like, I listen to so much stuff and read so much stuff that, like, one thing will apply to one guy and then not apply to another guy. And like, I like, how do you know? Like, how do you, Kenyon Drake, right? We saw that Gruden quote, right? Oh, Kenyon Drake is gonna, still have the same, don't bother jumping on Kenyon Drake, because it's going to be Peyton Barber, and Kenyon Drake's going to do what he normally does. And no, Kenyon Drake played more than played a lot more. Yeah, Barber did come in, but he only came in at like 5% owned. There were some places that were like, Kenyon Drake's going to be 20% owned, and you're going to be smart and fade him. Like, and he didn't even come in at 20% though. I mean, like, I played a bunch of Kenyon Drake because I heard that you can't play him because his role isn't going to change. He's a $4,900 running back, and I'm already playing Steelers.
That catches passes.
Like, what's the difference between Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, other than the fact that Chase Edmonds is on a better team?
Nothing.
They're the same price. They're the same price.
I'm lower on the Raiders than the market, but all they do is prove that wrong every single week. They just went into pits. Everybody, again, another thing where we picked and choose when to apply. The Steelers beat the Bills, right? It was a lucky as hell when they beat the Bills in week 1. The Raiders are flying out on a short week, right? Off an emotional win on Monday Night Football, blah, blah, blah. They lose Josh Jacobs, and they come out, and the narrative is like, oh my God, the Steelers are just going to destroy the Raiders, right? The Raiders beat the Steelers quite handily, actually, beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Yeah, like you said, I pulled it up now. Kenyon Drake played 71%. 71% of the snaps. It's 6 targets.
Come on. But it's not about being right against. It's not being. I was right with Drake. It was that.
Oh, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right. No, I just thought the field was underestimating. Mm-hmm. All I had to do was figure out the probability. Right. Yeah. I thought the probability was higher than 5%. That he would be just as much of a worthwhile playing at 4,900 as any of these other guys that are going to be 2 or 3 times more owned than him. But if you tell me that Kenny Drake is like 20% owned, then he's an X out of my lineups. I mean, I know people that are listening to this podcast probably have gotten this already. This is the fundamentals, the theory of DFS. But it's just in NFL, it's when you play baseball or NBA, this stuff doesn't it's daily. So you never get these week-long reflections. But in NFL, we could have an entire 2-hour-long show of every single week of going through how come one thing applied to one guy but not the other guy, every single week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to bring up one more because I'm going to make fun of my Sunday morning co-host and Ben Gretsch, and and it's not just him, everybody, right? Remember TJ Hawkinson last week? The Lions go nuts. TJ Hawkinson has a big game, right? He had 10 targets on almost 60 Lions pass attempts. Don't get me wrong, 10 targets. That's
but
great.
I don't think the Lions are going to be throwing 60 times much.
No, exactly. And he looked great, and he scored his touchdown early, right? But people said, okay, look, even though his target share wasn't very good, even though they threw 40 times in the second half, the fact that he only got 2 of those targets, that's okay. That's okay. Ignore that second half. Did you see what he did in the first half? Did you see that touchdown? He had 7 first-half targets. Oh, my gosh. TJ Hawkinson wheels up, right? Again, God, I love Davis Maddock. I do content with Davis Maddock. He tweeted, after week 1 reaction, Hawkinson's getting 200 targets or whatever. And I'm like,
look at Darren Whoa. Look at Darren Waller.
But the same reaction doesn't apply to Kyle Pitts. This was the debate I had with Gretsch. Kyle Pitts had a higher target share, almost as many raw targets as TJ Hawkinson, And like, oh, but they looked bad, and he got his targets throughout the course of the entire game. We didn't get to pick, 12 plays where he got targeted at a high rate. And like, everybody's like, no, I like Hawkinson better than Pitts now. I'm like, what? Why does it apply differently to the different people? You know what I mean? Yeah, Waller. I mean, yeah, sure. I thought it was crazy he got 19 targets. What happened yesterday? Shocker, he didn't get 19 targets again. It's like, but we're picking and again. I know like you said, the people know this now, but I do think it's like kind of a worthwhile exercise to discuss these, because it really is that was the crux of like my entire process. It turned more into the roster construction thing, because and you talked about it, Ben and I discussed it on Sunday morning. Like last week, it was got to play CMC, got to play Kamara, got to play, these cheaper wide receivers. And I know that those wide receivers didn't exist, but there were paths, like I said, with the lineup that I wrote out, or I read out, to getting some of those wide receivers that you wanted still in that 6 or 7K range with these elite running backs. And so just people are like, nope. The Saints are too good, right? The Saints just beat, I can't play CMC. The Saints just destroyed the Packers. I can't play Christian McCaffrey, who scored 30 fantasy points without scoring a touchdown or getting a bonus in week 1. Can't play him. He was like 5% owned. In like these higher stakes, it was crazy. Now he didn't do it. It was Derrick Henry, like you said, but same thing. Derrick Henry, 5% owned, because we can't play him, because the receptions are bad. He's on the road, blah, blah, blah. So it was such a good week to point out all these examples. I think.
Here's one. I got another one for you. Okay. Tyler Lockett last week. Crushed. Okay. This week, in the SPY, he was 5.7% owned, and Metcalf was 16.8% owned, and they're only 300 apart in like they're very close in salary, much more now. Well, Lockett can't do it 2 weeks in a row, right? Like, how come it applies to one person and not the? I mean, like it's because they go, oh, Lockett got there in 5 catches, right, the week before. Yep. Have you watched the Seahawks play for the past 5 years? Right. Russell Wilson has put up ceiling games on 23 passes. I mean, like that is the way. Like, you're describing the Seahawks. You're not describing players. Like, yes, yeah. When Rondell Moore gets there on 5 catches, can that be unsustainable? Okay, I give you a little bit more credit, but like, no, I gotta play DK. I gotta play the alpha, right? I gotta play DK Metcalf. Why is the disparity in the SPY 16.8% to 5.9%? Why is the difference? Metcalf put up 11 points. Lockett put up 34 points. And then, you know what'll happen next week? Lockett will be a little bit more than Metcalf, and then Metcalf will still be more owned, and then Lockett gets it's like seeing the numbers on the roulette wheel that came out. It's like there's no, what, they're about the same median projection wise. Why is the difference? Why? How? It's when you tell when gamblers say, I'm playing this guy because he's due, and then you talk to another gambler, I'm playing this guy because he's hot. It's like what? Yeah. Like, how do you pick and choose who's hot and who's due? Either way, you're doing it wrong. But like, I mean, that's to me, that's all of Twitter. To me, that's the fun of Twitter, of essentially seeing who believes someone is hot and who believes someone is due. Right, and the air yards are obviously due. Gosh. Right, yes. If you have a lot of air yards, that means you're due. And if you have an Adam Thielen's touchdown rate, that he's hot. Right, so you can't play. He can't. Pascal catching touchdowns, like that, or KJ Osborne. Let's see what people do with KJ Osborne next week. Or I don't even know if he's on the slate.
God, I hope not. I don't want to talk about KJ Osborne anymore. We've discussed KJ Osborne for like a half hour over the last week. But it is really funny. So again, another example. Tyler Lockett can't sustain it. DK Metcalf is due, right? Triple the ownership. Mike Evans gets shut down last week. He's the highest. Now he's the highest owned. Nobody played Antonio Brown. Like, people still played a little bit of Godwin just because that game was appealing, but nobody played Antonio Brown, who might have looked the best out of. I mean, he looked like freaking peak Antonio Brown.
Mike Evans was due. Antonio Brown was hot.
Yes.
So we don't play Antonio Brown when we play Mike Evans.
Yes. And but then look at the Chargers, right? It's just so fascinating, and so I'm constantly kind of trying to, sometimes seriously and sometimes joking, on Twitter, but just point out kind of the hilarity of all that. And people, it's because, right, why is it's not even just, I guess, do versus hot. It's people are trying to project the outcomes, right? They're trying, and we have inputs to these projections. And shocker, the 6'4", 240-pound guy that runs a 4.340 that everybody was already more bullish on this year is going to project better than what is Lockett, 5'9", 175 pounds, catching all these bombs. And so like there's just inherent bias, and I'm not even saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying there's inherent bias in all of this, and I have mine too. Why do you think I don't play Derrick Henry that much? Because I struggle. I have a bias against basically Derrick. I really struggle with how to handle him, even when he's lower owned. Even though I know sometimes what the right thing is, I'm a human, and it's hard to click that button on Derrick Henry sometimes. But we all have them, and they're so funny to kind of point out, and especially right now, right in like week 12, we're not going to be having quite the same conversations. But for this first, even like month and a half or whatever of the season, this is the conversation like every single week.
I remember going to the season, Jalen Reagor's dust. Right?
Yep.
First year, right? Isn't there a narrative in season long that like you want to play second year wide receivers?
Yeah,
right?
second year breakouts.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply to Jalen Reagor though.
No, of course not.
Because they spent draft capital on another wide receiver. Like the front office is signaling that this guy sucks, right? And then he comes out and to me, he seemed pretty good the first two games. Right?
He should have scored. Yes, he should have scored again yesterday if he would have stayed in bounds. Yeah.
So, it's that picking and choosing. It's just like it's the same thing with the projection model. It's like it's going to do whatever has the most predictive power on all these variables, and then come out with the outputs. And you can't just say, well, I agree with this and not agree with the other. Like it's all doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to say that that this should apply 90% of the time, it's like you don't know the other 10% of the time where it fails. So like you can't. You're trying to pick the 10% of the time. I'm just saying that, like I'm just not even bothering trying to pick and choose and go. If you're going to bet on second, let's say your whole best ball strategy or whatever the hell it is was to bet on these second year wide receivers, like you should not have 0% Jalen Reagor. You should have enough of all of them, and hopefully that they all get there. Or you want to bet against first year tight ends, right? That's a narrative, right? Mm-hmm. Then you shouldn't have any first year any rookie. I don't know how many there are, but I mean it's like Kyle Pitts. I don't know if there's any other
Freiermuth from the Steelers. But yeah, the second year wide receiver thing is actually perfect. Now we're really getting into my sweet spot here, the thing I've been talking about for months. So be careful. But tonight, I'm sure I'll write him up for a good old showdown slate IQ. But it's actually your perfect example that someone told me. Basically, I kind of, not just second year breakouts, right? But like young players are the best bets to like take a ginormous leap forward, right? Like Adam Thielen can sustain, maybe even get a little better, but Adam Thielen isn't going to go from Adam Thielen to Devontae Adams, right? Like that doesn't really happen when you get to a certain age level. When you're betting on these players taking this huge leap, it's typically younger players. Just historically, that's how it works. And so tonight, the greatest example of this garbage, like you said, garbage type of second year is Quintez Cephus, right? If you're believing in this narrative, Quintez Cephus has no target competition, is the second year breakout wide, the same. He's a second year wide receiver. He might be the worst goddamn second year wide receiver in the NFL, but like he fits the mold. So if you believe in that thing, like you said, don't pick and choose. Don't say I believe in Laviska Shenault, because I do, which is looking horrible. Don't say I believe in Laviska Shenault, but don't believe in Quintez Cephus. It's the same application of this. Right,
because a lot of people are looking at Shenault now, the first two games. And
it's
a different team. Like they brought in a guy and that's why they brought in Marvin Jones. It's like people throughout the entire offseason are talking about, well, obviously when offensive coordinators and coaches change, you can't necessarily go by the past year's, style of play and play calling and all that type of stuff. Yet the Jaguars purposely brought in Marvin Jones because he knows the offense that is going to be run. And the first game of the season, the age model says "fuck you," right? Like that's like if you're gonna bet on age, especially in the beginning. Like I played AJ Green. I played a lot of Marvin Jones the first week. I played Marvin Jones, especially in the beginning of the year. Like maybe at the end of the year where maybe they're not feeling all that well. And of course, I say this. We're talking about I can't play Dusty, AJ Green, and Marvin Jones. These guys are still younger than me. So I'm like these old guys that are like 6 years younger than they're 34, and I'm like, dude, I'd love to be 34. I was 34 8 years ago.
Some of them are younger than me.
Right. Right. And you're calling them old and dusty.
Exactly.
But how come? But it comes back to, it's like, okay, well, you've prepared this entire offseason. And now in the first week of DFS, you're going to be like, how do you play Marvin? How do you play Marvin Jones at 3,700? How do you play Marvin Jones? How do you play Marvin Jones this week at 4,700 after he got like 11 targets the week before? And they go, well, how come you could throw that out yet not throw out something like that? That's the number to me. That's the number one point to me. That's hot. I think it's the hot or do question.
Yeah.
And I think
it is.
that's the gambler's fallacy, and you can't be thinking hot or do.
Right. And where it's most fascinating in terms of an edge, like especially again thinking, where my brain goes to my contests, is that, the quote unquote sharp thing, right? It's typically projections based. It is typically sticking to your priors and kind of only updating in the very, very, the Najee Harris, 100% snap share, Tyler Higbee, 100% snap share. It's the sharp play, right, has been determined that's what you don't change your priors on DK Metcalf versus Tyler Lockett. You do change your priors, or you do confirm your priors basically on the Najee thing, or you do update your priors on Tyler Higbee playing every snap, right? You like, it's all because the inputs to all these projections are very good, right? Like you said, it's pulling in the most predictive value into these projections, and all the best players in the world are using them. Now they're also combining a little bit of game theory, obviously correlation and all that kind of stuff, but it's really interesting in these contests because the train of thought is the same, right? Why is DK Metcalf triple the ownership of Tyler Lockett? I know it is that way in lower stakes, but sometimes the disparity gets like super crazy. Remember the Will Fuller week when he scored like 50 fantasy points off a zero?
Right. He looked horrible, and it's like, how do we not play Will Fuller at 4,000 against like the worst defense? And then he ends up being chalk, and you see that in PGA, right? Mm-hmm. Guy misses a cut at when he wasn't even being owned, and the next week he's the chalkiest player on the slate. Like, you didn't used to see that, but even the hot But Najee Harris, if Najee Harris, okay, what do you think? Here's a thought experiment. If Najee Harris would have had a 30-point DK game last week, how much more owned than 21% in the milli would he have been?
In the lower stakes milli,
lower
or
stakes.
in the lower stakes? If he scored 30 points in week one
instead of only 5.
And he was the same price in week 2, a shit ton. And that's what I was going to add. He would have been a shit ton more owned, in my opinion. And that's what I was going to add about Henderson too. When you brought up Henderson, he had an okay game, right? It was fine, but he didn't like blow the roof off or whatever. I think because those projections are adjusting some of these inputs early in the season, and so snap share is one of them, but efficiency and like market share of touchdowns, market share of all that kind of stuff can be, even if it gets bumped up just a little bit in the projections, it can get ratcheted up, and that can have a huge impact when you're only 5,700 or when you're only 6,000. If you ratchet up, any sort of market share or any sort of efficiency, those guys are going to shoot through the roof, and so I do think they would be a lot more owned.
Because in certain cases we're taking hot, in certain cases we're taking do. Like Najee Harris was due, and he was the most owned, right? And then there were certain players that but the hot end was the 100% of snaps. The due was that he didn't get the production there. Then we have a guy like Jamar Chase,
Mm.
who's 16% owned, 18% owned, 15, 13, some places. One game. He's hot, right? And Higgins goes back to being the alpha on getting the most targets on the team, as what would you expect, right? And then you look at Damian Harris, and you go doghouse, right? It's like, oh, like he did great the first week, other than the fumble. Now he's not. Why is he not hot? Why is he not hot? Right. Well,
And Stevenson was inactive.
Right. Stevenson was inactive, and 12% in places or whatever. Gronk. I think Gronk is a perfect example. Gronk is the perfect example. Well, you can't play Gronk. He's old man. He's not going to be Gronk from 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he has Brady throwing the ball. Like, he also has three
Against
wide
the
receivers.
Falcons.
He also has 3 wide receivers that the defense actually has to pay attention to. It ain't just Julian Edelman and some crappy Mohamed Sanu or some bullshit out there. And you wonder, you can't play Gronkowski at 4,700. Like, did you see week 1? O.J. Howard barely played.
Yeah.
But Gronkowski, we're not going to. A.J. Green, right? Typically, it's the old guys, right? Mm-hmm. The old guy, A.J. Green played on like 87% of the snaps outside against. Oh no, I don't want to play him at 3,700 in a game with the Cardinals having a 30+ total. Like, why does it not apply to A.J. Green yet it applies to other players?
I definitely haven't. It's old players for sure, but I mean, to me, it's just this not adjusting any sort of priors on inputs unless it like over the top confirms your priors. The Najee Harris, again, going back to the Najee Harris type of thing, right? People were already expecting a huge snap share for Najee Harris, but then you see 100% in week 1, so it's like boom, confirmed. We were right about Najee Harris. Let's ratchet up that projection, and the efficiency will come. Which, shocker, I'm not so certain that the efficiency is ever. I know he kind of got there at the end, but I don't know if efficiency is going to be in the Najee Harris playbook. But on the other side, right, like you said, AJ Green, you're like, no, I can't do it with AJ Green. So even when he plays every snap, doesn't matter. He looks dusty, right? And he kind of does. But like, why do your eyeballs matter more on AJ Green, not on Najee Harris? I think Najee Harris looks dusty, and he's 22 or whatever. Like, it is always really, really interesting. Yeah, Gronk is definitely the best example, and I didn't play Gronk again this week, and I'll continue to hold that L proudly, I guess. But I will say I do think same thing. Gronk actually looks good, so he's a more interesting case even than like AJ Green. I'm like, AJ Green, he does just look really bad. I get it, whatever, if you don't want to play him. But like, Gronk looks like legit, and the Bucs look unreal on offense, and they look like they have no interest in letting Rojo and Fournette fuck it up for him anymore. That just give it to Tom and let him throw it to these studs. And so, yeah, I wonder if do you think people will adjust at all on someone like Gronk, because I do think it'll run out eventually. Like, I mean, he's just older, and like, they're going to be playing for a Super Bowl, so they probably don't want to, when they got a playoff spot locked in, want to be playing him a million snaps, in week 14 or something like that. But for right now, like, I don't know, these kind of guys are the ones that are most interesting to me, right? Tyler Lockett. Somebody replied to my tweet earlier today. I said, yeah, in one of my examples, it was about Lockett basically being, the man in that offense. And he said, well, that's not sustainable, right? And I'm like, why not?
Why can't it be?
Explain to me why he can't be the alpha in this offense. They got a new offense, right? I could tell the story. They got a new offensive coordinator that's better. Clearly, it's working. I mean, they're lighting it up. I know they lost, but the offense isn't the issue, right? They look awesome, and he's been the man in that offense. Why can't it be, right? But everybody is going to bet against Lockett. They might start bet. I don't know if they'll start betting against Kupp. We'll see about Kupp. He also looks pretty insane. Gronk, yeah, AJ Green. I'm trying to think of, Marvin Jones was a good example. Marvin Jones is the leader in that offense.
I found the best example of this. I think it's the best example. Okay, Melvin Gordon.
Oh shit.
In the Mega Millionaire is 1.48% owned. Okay, Javonte Williams is 5.68% owned. Okay, you don't know what direction I'm going with this. Wait. Okay, so what we're saying is that Melvin Gordon, who's technically the running back one, had a good game last week. I didn't have a good game. He just got the touchdown. He was 11 for 33. He's basically an inefficient running back with a younger guy behind him getting like 50% of the snaps, 40 to 50% of the snaps. And we prefer to play the guy that's on the other side of the timeshare, even at very similar prices, right? Because the number one running back is not efficient. I don't know if you call Melvin Gordon dusty, but kind of dusty. Don't want to play Melvin Gordon. Want to play Javonte Williams. Eventually, he's going to get there, right? I'm going to play the guy on the opposite side, 40% of snaps, and I'm going to play that guy. Okay? You're gonna love this example.
Oh no.
You're gonna so love. This is the best one ever. In the Mega Millionaire, Ezekiel Elliott was 18.86% owned.
I do love this one. Yes.
And Tony Pollard was 0.11% owned. Now tell me, is there necessarily, based on what you've seen even the first game, is there a big difference between Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams and Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard? Isn't that the same? Isn't that the same? Pretty much the same example.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up because I don't know it off the top of my head really, really quickly. So Zeke did play, a ton of the snaps in week one, but he didn't get a ton of the touches. And so to your point, we were like, okay, it's all good for Zeke. Yep, it's all good for Zeke.
He's due, right?
He's totally fine. It's bounce back week for Zeke, right? And shocker, it's not. He's just not very good. But it's bounce back week for Zeke. Melvin Gordon, nope. I had no interest in you, Melvin Gordon. And like you said, they're like the same. They're very close to the same price. And I get it, right? There's a tiny bit more to it with the Pollard thing because of how many snaps Zeke played or whatever. But moving forward, we might be needing to have a very serious conversation about how similar those two situations actually are. And it really is a good point. And damn, that was fun, by the way, the Tony Pollard.
Point one, you can't get a better.
Awesome.
I showed you the two examples, one at 18% versus literally almost like in two lineups total. And it's like, what's the difference? One guy, I mean, why? I mean, it's just. You can't, in that situation, someone's going to come out with some football example of, in this situation, they're playing. Like, dude, I'm just looking at numbers. It looks like the same fucking thing to me. Why is the disparity of ownership that big? At least in the Gordon Williams example, Williams is 7% and Gordon's 4%, which I still think should be closer, but it's close enough, but not 18 to
zero.
To nearly zero.
All basically zero.
Because people are like, no, there's no way. We saw the first game, Tony Pollard was lining up on this with Zeke and coming in enough that it's like, oh, well, that's his role. Maybe he gets a little additional role, but he's not going to come 50%. Well, who says he doesn't? You think that's going to happen with Javonte Williams without proof? Right. Yeah. So why can't I do the same thing with Tony Pollard? I'm not saying I played Tony Pollard. I'm just trying to find these examples of every week. We're coming into this third week. I'm sure that you could find plenty based on the first two games. Here's a question for you. This is more football related coming into this week. The thing that I've known, Leone posted this after the first week, that the team with the lowest passing expectation number of plays was the Bengals in week one. Now, we came into the season with the Bengals being they're going to chuck the ball, right? Burrow's going to throw the ball a lot. Against the Bears, low passing ball. They were behind. They had to come back. But they just ran Mixon 20 times for no apparent reason. Do you think people are going to do you think people are going to notice and then assume that the Bengals passing game is now they've become a shittier team? Or do you think people are more likely to stay on a prior and I'd love to play a Burrow stack, a cheap Burrow stack, at low ownership, if the narrative is the Bengals aren't throwing the ball much anymore? And
I think so.
Or I'd rather do the opposite of like they're going to go back because look what happened with the Cowboys. That's the reason why that game was stackable because they're like, oh, the Cowboys are just going to chuck the ball 50 times.
And they threw it 27 times.
Right. Now, is that what it's going to be going forward? Who knows? Probably not, right? But like, how could you apply it to what? If you see the Bengals with a higher rushing volume than a passing volume and go, that's the way it is going forward, how come you're not applying that to the Cowboys?
Yeah.
Yet I guarantee it's not going to be the same for both teams.
No, it absolutely will not be the same for both teams. And to your initial question about the Bengals, I do believe so. I believe that people will I also think there's a correlation between kind of like the Henderson thing we talked about. Why wasn't Henderson so chalky? Because we saw what happened with Higbee and Kupp, because the passing game is getting such volume or playing such whatever. There's a positive thing going on with some of the passing game weapons that Henderson then in turn makes it easier to kind of confirm the skepticism that people had coming in about Henderson. And I think the same thing is happening with the Bengals. We kind of had this even coming into the season from a projection standpoint, like, okay, Mixon is probably going to be the workhorse. They keep telling us Mixon's going to be the workhorse, but how much are they going to run and how effectively are they going to run? We don't really know about that because we think, based on the small sample that we had last year of Joe Burrow being in there, they're just going to chuck the ball all over the place. And they got Jamar Chase, right? It only makes sense. Why would they run when they have all this? Well, now we're seeing, and there's going to be, in my opinion, really severe narrative about the offensive line. Even though they didn't pass very much, Burrow was getting destroyed by the Bears. They had a ton of sacks. It was. I thought the Bears were almost going to run away with that one. It's just their offense sucks so bad they can't. But I think it's going to be, even in a game where they had a matchup to throw, right? All these things are going to start aligning. It was the perfect matchup to throw. Did you see what the Bears did against the Rams the week before? Their secondary sucks, but their front seven is good. You're going to get all these combining factors where I think people are going to start to adjust those priors on the Bengals. Now, maybe I haven't looked at any sort of slate or anything like that, but maybe, somebody's cheap and they might pop in a projection, but I kind of tend to think not. And I think that is a situation, to your point, where people are still going to be, oh, it's the Cowboys. That was 1 week. They're still going to throw. Don't fade CD or Amari or whatever. But on the Bengals, we might get, and Burrow for sure, like a receiver might pop, but I think people are going to be very, very out on Burrow really, really fast.
I think very similar. To me, the things that's going to be more normalized are the pass rate. Like for instance, I don't see myself ever not having a Josh Allen stack.
Yeah.
They just throw the long. Josh Allen's just been inefficient the first 2 games, and maybe that continues. Maybe Josh Allen sucks now, right? Okay, but here we go, Eric. I got another one for you. Here's another one. Hotter do. And this all comes down to age. Josh Allen, right? Josh Allen. The Bills throw like majority of their plays. They're one of the highest passing rate teams. Mm-hmm. Most people will say that, okay, Josh Allen is not as good as we think he is. Yeah, but they're still going to play Diggs. They're still going to play Beasley. They're still going to play Sanders. Allen is still going to be a high-owned quarterback like every slate that he is because he rushes a little, mm-hmm. right? He's a young kid in a good offense that doesn't really care about the running game, right? I mean, like right. They really don't. They run second. They pass first, run second. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's another team that's like that. There's another team that has 3 good wide receivers, and they pass first and run second. And that team is quarterbacked by Ben Roethlisberger. yet Josh Allen will still be 9-10. The Bill stacks will be aplenty in GPPs. Yeah, you say, how about Big Ben with Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool? You go, how the fuck do you play Ben Roethlisberger? It's like Ben the first 2 games was just as inefficient as Josh Allen, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like what's the obviously Josh Allen has some rushing upside. I get that, but from a pass rating, like in GPPs, Tom Brady, right? Take a look at this past week. People were like, do I play Dak? Do I play Herbert? Do I go down to Hurts? Do I play Josh Allen? And it's like, dude, show me a team that pass first, run second, especially at the goal line. And it's like, why aren't we playing Buccaneers? Tom Brady's 43 years old. Well, who cares?
Yeah.
Obviously it doesn't matter. Brady's playing with the most talented team he's ever had his entire career.
Yep.
So who cares that he's 43 years old? He's going to throw 4 or 5 touchdowns every game, it seems like. Right?
At least until they run into a defense that's at least competent. I mean, and even then, yeah. I mean, it feels like 300 yards and multiple touchdowns is just like a borderline lock because he is their entire offense, And he doesn't. An interesting thing that somebody mentioned about Brady in the offseason that I thought was pretty fascinating is he doesn't take sacks. He also doesn't really throw the ball away. That's why James White was such a big thing. Is that Brady's so good, at not having negative plays. And so they're just constantly racking up points. They play fast, right? He'll throw the ball down the field. When he throws it away, he's really smart about how he does it. Like he'll chuck it up to Mike Evans and be like, either he's going to catch this or maybe it's pass interference. He doesn't really care about throwing the interception. They're just an offense that, and again, I didn't play Brady and I have issues with Brady like I do with Derrick Henry. It's a full-blown personal bias. I will tell everybody and totally admit to it. But it's also something that I'm aware of, and I see what the Bucs are doing. But the field, the reason why it's a problem is because the field does what I do, and they're like, nope, he's kind of expensive. He doesn't run. I don't know which receiver to pick. And so they just totally ignore them. And those are the situations I need, I know I need to get better at, but they're advantageous for everybody.
Right. But I'm describing situations of someone that would say, well, you got to play teams like this. It's like, well, how about the Steelers? Well, you can't play Ben. Like, I'm describing what you're describing. I'm describing what you're describing. Like, I'm pretty sure at some point this season, Ben Roethlisberger is going to throw 430 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the Steelers may lose the game, right? Yeah. It may be one of those 38-31 games that they lose or something. But from all intents and purposes, we saw this last year with Ben when he's quarterbacking. That he's looking at he's at the age of not giving a fuck, right? Same for Brady. Yep. These are the types of quarterbacks that play calling doesn't matter. They call the play. Brady's calling the plays. Brady doesn't want to run a play. He doesn't run a play. Like Peyton Manning was like that. Once Aaron Rodgers, right? Yeah. Like
Byron Leftwich is their offensive coordinator. Spoiler: Byron Leftwich doesn't get to overrule Tom Brady.
Right. But Byron Leftwich, a 7-time Super Bowl Hall of Fame.
Maybe Belichick had some say. Belichick is the elite level clout. Maybe Brady would listen to somebody like he's not listening to fucking Byron Leftwich about any play calls.
Right. But as far as throwing or like Ben Roethlisberger, they're going to throw the ball, even though I'm not a big fan of their coaching staff.
Right.
But like these are the types of guys. But you have to get past the fact that yes, they're older. Yes, they're not as good as what they were when they were younger. Like you have to know that just by watching that Roethlisberger is nowhere near as good as he was 10 years ago. I mean, no. He's one of the worst. Probably he's the most immobile quarterback.
Yes, it's bad.
When Matt Ryan is rushing the ball into the end zone on a quarterback draw. That's a play that I don't think Roethlisberger could do. The only thing that Roethlisberger could do is the quarterback sneak. He's like a million for a million on that play.
The other example is not the old guy, but this was kind of part of my thesis coming into week 1 that I actually feel even better about moving forward. But a team that is going to pass a lot and that the market is just they just decided they don't want anything to do with them. But it's the Panthers. And Darnold, they that game was over from the kickoff. It was over. Jameis embarrassed himself. That was old school Jameis. It was so bad. They couldn't run. Kamara had 7 rushing yards or something like that. It was absolutely horrible. The Panthers, it was basically never in doubt. Even Christian McCaffrey gets dinged up. He was cramping in the second half, and even then, the Saints had no chance. But the Panthers still threw 38 times, despite the fact they were winning by 3 scores for basically the entire game. if you just remove the name Sam Darnold from from the quarterback position, DJ Moore, awesome. Robbie Anderson, awesome. Terrace Marshall is a young rookie everybody's excited about. And Christian McCaffrey is, arguably the best running back in the NFL. And they have also very innovative, smart coaching staff. Joe Brady is their offensive coordinator who made Joe Burrow a thing at LSU and made Clyde Edwards-Helaire a thing, and he might not be a thing anymore. But they have this offense, this innovative pass-first offense with amazing weapons. And that was, like I said, coming into week one, I played Panther stacks in week one because that was my thesis. But the market is, if you attach Sam Darnold's name to anything, it's kind of like Big Ben. No, maybe you're right, but I don't want to have anything to do.
They'll go by last year. Like the Panthers played at one of the slowest paces last year, but now they're not. Not
anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah, shocker. Yeah, shocker. The teams can change. Yeah, the teams can change. And Teddy Bridgewater, people were out, right? I played Teddy Bridgewater because, in week one, he did throw the ball downfield. That's the thing everybody talks about, right? He doesn't have upside. He doesn't throw the ball down the field. Week one, he did throw the ball downfield. And yesterday, he threw the ever-living shit out of the ball down the field. Cortland Sutton broke the record for air yards in a game yesterday. Cortland Sutton had 240 air yards. Yeah, 78. Yeah, I mean, it's an absurd number. It's because Teddy was pushing the ball down the field, right? And so anyway, all these continued add on to the list of examples where people, for whatever reason, bias. And maybe you're right about Sam Darnold, and I'm wrong about Sam Darnold. But the point is, no one's buying into it, so that's when I want to buy into it.
Here's another example of. I mean, we're talking about football stuff, but Alvin Kamara. Are we over? Here is Alvin Kamara in the past. I think from a raw talent perspective, he's a talented person.
Yep.
This offense is nothing like it doesn't have Drew Brees and it doesn't have Michael Thomas, and it has Jameis Winston at quarterback, who when he was on the Buccaneers, he didn't throw to running backs either, right? I mean, he's gonna find a deeper target for. I mean, he's not gonna get to Kamara in the flat, and it doesn't seem like with Winston at quarterback, they're even running Kamara on actual wide receiver routes.
Correct.
Right? And they got garbage out there. They're sending out these wide receivers that are not really that talented, and they're not sending Kamara on routes. It's dump off route. It's all flats and curls and things like that. Do you think that if the Saints are bad and there's no Thomas there to draw any attention, that we're looking at teams just going, if we could just take Kamara out of the game, we win. And if Winston's not going to pass and going to dump off the ball, is Kamara an 8 to 9K running back anymore? Now, I'm asking this not saying that I think he is or he's not. I'm just saying that the prior on Kamara is, if we saw coming week that Kamara was 7,200, we'd be jamming him into every lineup that we have. And maybe that's not the case, because take a look at Zeke. You told me 3 years ago that Zeke was in a game where they had the highest total and he was 6,200. We'd go, well, obviously he's 3,000 underpriced. I mean, he'd be like 72% owned. Same for Todd. Remember Todd Gurley, right? I mean, right? I mean, maybe this is the same type of, I can't, it's going to, people hear me and go, oh, that's not going to be Kamara. People didn't think that would be Gurley. People didn't think that would be Elliott. People didn't think that would be Melvin Gordon. We could list all these running backs, and I know we're getting into your wheelhouse of best ball, of this is the whole concept of running backs don't really matter as much as you think they do. What does if Christian McCaffrey only got 60% of the snaps, he'd be at 7,000, 6,500. He's Austin Eckler, right? I mean, he's right. If Dalvin Cook got 60% of the snaps, it's like, okay, he's Joe Mixon. I mean, right. I mean,
we just had that about Chase Edmonds, right? We just talked about that. Chase Edmonds, he gets 60%, and Connor gets 40%. He's a little more valuable because he gets passing. He gets receptions, and obviously CMC would get the goal line role, but that's why he would be more expensive.
But if you gave Chase Edmonds goal line work and 95% of the snaps, Chase Edmonds is $10,000. Chase Edmonds is Christian McCaffrey.
And yeah, and in an even better offense.
Right.
In an even better offense.
So the differences between a lot of these players, especially that position, is opportunity, not necessarily talent. So if we see that Kamara is not getting the opportunities because of an inefficient offense and a different scheme and not having not having Drew Brees there, like, yeah, but he's talented. Who cares if he's talented? If he's going to play 70% of the snaps, the Saints are going to be down most games, so he's not going to be rushing the ball. And Peyton doesn't seem to be, and Peyton's not putting him into wide receiver routes. And when they are, Winston's not throwing him the ball. Like, maybe by the end of the season, we'll see Kamara at $5,800, and Tyson and Jones is taking 30% of the rushing work on top. And then we look, oh, the mighty have fallen. And I guarantee you that people will listen to this coming into week 3 thinking that I'm nuts, to think that's even a possibility. I'm not saying that it'll happen. All I'm saying is that is part of the range of outcomes.
Yeah,
and
it's really funny.
I'm more willing to jump on wherever the market isn't. Mm-hmm. So if we come into a slate where Kamara is 7,600 after 3 bad weeks or something, I think this coming week he's like 8,200 or something.
He is against the Patriots, but still 8,200.
But you understand, like, his price is going to come down. There's going to be a week, possibly.
If you might have another bad one this week. I mean, this is a tough matchup. It could be week 4 or whatever.
Right, and then it's the next week he's 7,000 against the Cardinals, and he's like 38% right. Like something like that will happen, and I'll be on the other side of it, or it'll be. I don't think the narrative is going to be after 3 games. I think Kamara people are more likely to be on the prior than the current.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Zeke is someone that you'd more be on the current than the prior, right? Like,
yes. But I do just want to touch on your point about Kamara is so true, and I think he was one of the most fascinating guys from an offseason perspective. He was actually a guy earlier in the offseason, in the draft season or whatever, I was really low on. I was pretty out on this kind of whole Saints situation because of the things that you outlined, right? Drew Brees wasn't even good at the end of his tenure with the Saints, but there was a certainty to how he played, and that played into Kamara's hands, right? He wasn't running, and he really wasn't throwing the ball down the field. So when something wasn't there right away, it was like, boop, give it to Kamara. Just get it to Kamara right now. That's why Michael Thomas was awesome. We saw in the short stretch last year, things were a little bit shaky for Kamara. And then, the offseason kind of plays out. Jameis does win the job, which is better than Taysom, at least for him, which was the issues last year. Michael Thomas goes down, which is like, okay, they don't have any receivers. They got to get the ball to Kamara, right? And then Latavius gets cut, which in theory opens up some more for Kamara. So I kind of adjusted my priors during the offseason. I wasn't stubborn on him coming into the year. And then week 1, his role did look really, really good. And then we see yesterday, like, he's been this roller coaster. And I think some of those reasons for concern reared their head. I know it was a fluke. It's also possible, like you said, I don't know what the answer is. Maybe we just need to throw that game out from yesterday. But it's also possible that, like, look, that's Jameis. And look, those receivers do suck. And Jameis doesn't check down that much. And, if he's getting more carries, if Kamara's getting more carries, like, who cares? The reason why we don't play Derrick Henry isn't because
no, but I mean, if the Saints are bad and he gets carries, then what's the difference between him and like David Montgomery or something? Like you could play any Josh Jacobs, any of those types of guys. We don't care about 20. If Kamara's getting 20 carries and no touch, like for a Saints team that's going to go 6-10, like we could play Melvin Gordon for that. I mean, like we could do that.
But week 1 happened, and it confirmed everybody's priors, right? He got 18 carries in a game that, he doesn't even ever really get
No, the narrative last week was there was such a blowout that look at how well he did even without any fourth quarter points.
Yep. And it was, throw that one out, right? That's what it was. It was, look, he had a big workload, even only in 3 quarters. He is who we thought, he is this new workhorse that we thought he was going to be. And like, I'm not so sold. I should have looked up his, he didn't get a lot of touches. Even I know the game got out of hand fairly early there.
Most people would say that the game being behind would make it better for Kamara.
He only caught 4 balls. These are in the old days. If this would have happened,
less balls than Derrick Henry.
Yes. They switched roles. He got all these carries. He got the congratulations, 8 carries for 5 yards for Alvin Kamara, and Derrick Henry got caught 6 balls.
But this is what makes the game fun.
It is. I love it. I love talking about all that stuff.
No, but this to me, this is what makes it like seeing where the market overreacts and then just doing the opposite. Because people will. That's why I listen to the shows. Like I'm not like when I listen to you and Gretch, or when I listen to it could be anything, any of the shows, right? You listen to Levitan and Silva Talk, and it's just like I enter anything that I listen to or anything that I read or any my entire approach of DFS is we don't know shit. So my all my gauge is like I want to listen to people that are looking at the stuff that other people will listen to, and it's weird to say. It's not that I don't respect people that do content. Is that I'm not making decisions on what you think is going to happen.
Right.
I think that no one knows well enough to predict 100% of outcomes. So there's always going to be arbitrage between what people think and what will actually happen. And as long as I'm able to gauge which side of the line I should be on, then I'm going to profit from that arbitrage. That's when I don't predict outcomes. So that's really all we're doing here. So like my Camara, people will say, oh, someone DM'd me and said, good call on Derek Carr, right? Because I played some Raiders stuff because I was talking about playing that game. It's like, I didn't call that. Carr was 1 point. That Raiders stack was barely owned.
Mm-hmm.
If the Raiders stack if Derek Carr was 14% owned yesterday, you think I would have had any Derek Carr in my lineup? Of course
right.
not. He should not be 14. That Carr, if Waller, right? Oh, 19 targets, 32% owned at 7,600 on DK. Like I would have none of them. So it's not about
why did I play the Broncos? Why did I play the Broncos? Not because I love the Broncos or because I was saying, oh my God, they're going to go score 40 points. It's all the factors come together, right? No Jerry Jeudy, Jaguars matchup, they're cheap, and no one's going to play him. Like
right. Sutton was 2% owned, right? Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, Sutton's 2% owned. Idea. Why not?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you doing? You're doing best ball stuff for basketball now?
Oh yeah, NBA is out. I did the first live. I've started NBA content that had some technical difficulties with getting the rankings up this weekend, so that's part of my task this afternoon. So anybody, any of the other, the sick people that are out there, there are people out there like me wanting to draft NBA best ball right now. What is today? The mid September.
We are in a messed up world. A month.
Yeah,
but it's not. Hey, it's not like you sick people that are. I know people that were drafting best ball teams the day after the last Super Bowl.
I know. Right? I didn't get that early, but I was in pretty early. I remember I talked to somebody, and that's what they were like. Yeah, I did this draft the day after the Super Bowl, and I was like, pardon? after the Super Bowl? They're like, yeah, I got Kyle Pitts in like the 12th round. I'm like, no shit, you drafted the day after the Super Bowl. Like nobody even knows who these players are.
Right. They're not even on a team yet.
Yeah, none of the rookies are on a team, and that's what he's showing. Not to derail, but he's showing a funny team, and it's like got all these rookies and stuff. He's like, yeah, it's fine. Travis Etienne got hurt because I got so and so in the last round, and he turned out to be like a 3rd round pick or whatever. Like that just sounds like total anarchy, dude.
Is there any special strategies in NBA best ball? Is there a zero center strategy?
So I do think there are. I'm not claiming to be. If you're coming to me and you think like I have solved this NBA best ball game, you're coming to the wrong partner. But I do think there's interesting. Using all. I mean, that's all I've really done for best ball is using like the same things we talk about for DFS, right? Leveraging the market's overconfidence in situations, but also roster construction, correlation, right? Pulling all the different levers that I can pull within, one individual team and like. Attacking fragility, right? Being, actually like really, really fragile teams because I'm trying to, hit this kind of crazy, what you need for an NBA season to play out in your favor when you only get to take 16 players is like, you need a lot of good luck. And so I do actually think there's, like we haven't come up with names yet. So maybe that'll be my task.
Right. You have to come up with cute names, a robust and zero RB, like it's some type of, whatever the structural drafting type that you're doing, that type of thing. It has to be, because obviously NBA best ball is like 100 times less popular than
Yeah,
or popular at all. I mean, I don't like I.
it's not popular at all.
It's
Yet.
not even popular. Like, not at all.
Not at all. But it is. I will say, yeah. Thanks for the lead in. NFL in season best ball contests are going to be coming. So I'll definitely be covering those at spikeweek.com. And then NBA stuff is up and running. But I am of course also still doing all my DFS work at Roto Grinders. Yeah, I got NBA best ball rankings to do, and then Showdown Slate IQ for a Monday Night Football game to do after this. So it's a very odd collection of tasks that I got to do for a Monday in September.
And then you're Erik Beimfohr on Twitter. I'm Blender HD as usual, and we'll see what happens in week 3. Right, going through you'll be on you're going to be on the show for the whole season. Do you think you can
Every
make all 18 weeks?
It's not if I keep playing James O'Shaughnessy and KJ Hamler. They're not gonna have me. They're not gonna have me back when my conviction played KJ Hamler.
And as always, you can pick up The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.